All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's good to see all of you. We are at our 10th week and we are slowly but surely moving our way through Keller's book on the reason for God. We have about 5 weeks left, and I might even try and shorten that if I can, just because we've been doing a lot here and we are at fall. We're kind of getting ready to turn over new leaves, if you will, get to new things and that. So plan on the next probably 5 weeks and we should be done. One of those weeks I will be gone again. I'll be up in Marshalltown preaching, and that'll be September 14th, just to give you a little bit of a heads up. We're still a couple Sundays away from that, but I will remind you. And for today, we are again looking at apologetics. We've switched gears, as I said. We were looking at objections that unbelievers raised for the first half of the class. Now we're looking internally. We're looking at the witness of God himself to himself and to the world, so that we can see what clues and what tidbits he has left for us to understand and to build our faith on, to recognize that he has given us a firm foundation. We aren't just taking a blind leap into the dark and believing, but it's a well-reasoned, rational, thought-out decision that we've made based on good evidence. And today we're looking at something that is probably unusual from most of our perspectives, and that's the issue of sin. And so let's see if they left me a. Keller kind of is asking us the question, sin, is it a good thing? So let me toss that out to get us started. Is sin a good thing?
No. No.
Other thoughts? Is sin a good thing?
I think it's so obvious that it's no, it must be yes.
And you're right. Sin in and of itself in our lives is not a good thing. But, I'm sorry. I was just
going to say that we were born into sin. Like we were so it's like, is it a good thing that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
I think I do understand that if we're born in sin, is it a good thing that we're born in sin, that we have sin? And the answer, I think, is yes, by the way. And, like you were saying, it's not yes because let's go out and commit sin, like Paul says, should we commit sin because of grace and therefore more grace abounds, and, may it never be. But sin in and of itself is a symptom, if you think about it. A lot of times when you go to the doctor's not too worried about how good you're feeling. What he wants to know is, are you feeling pain? Because if you're feeling pain, that tells him that there's something wrong. And so he says, if you're feeling pain, where are you feeling it? And he starts to poke and prod, and he starts to localize, he starts to figure it out. The pain is what directs him, tells him what may be wrong with you, because there are different kinds of pain, those of you who have felt it. Some of it is sharp, some of it is rather dull and achy. Each one is giving the doctor really good information about where your problem is, what's wrong, how to deal with it, what he needs to do. We hate pain, but it's really one of the best things we have. And to give you a good example, if you think about it, what's the one disease, does anybody know, that is the biggest problem is the lack of pain? Leprosy. Exactly right. Lepers lose the nerve endings, lose the feeling in their pain in their hands and their feet and that, and they have to be extra careful that they notice if something is wrong. They can put their hand on a hot plate and don't feel it, and they can come away with a 3rd-degree burn from it because they haven't felt the pain. You and I touch something that's hot, it's whoosh, ouch. They don't feel it. Sin is like that. If we dull sin, if we dull it in our lives, it's like dulling pain in a body. It may feel better until you realize, I've just given myself a third-degree burn spiritually without even realizing it. So yes, sin is a good thing in the sense of it should awaken us to the fact that there's something wrong. And that's kind of where we're headed today. Well, let me ask you a question though. You know, many people, when you talk to them, both saved and unsaved, what do they think about what the doctrine of sin is? Anybody know what the doctrine of sin is? You know, when we think about sin, what do we think about it?
Well, generally, we identify it as being apart from God's law, or being the contrary, taking a contrary position to what God stands for.
Exactly. And that's a real good definition of it. And when we think of sin in practical terms, you know, when we talk about what you've brought up, we are born in sin and we have a sin nature. A lot of people, when they think about that or when they hear that, they find that very, very bleak and a pessimistic thing, particularly if you're unsaved and you hear Christians talking about sin, and all these Christians are saying you're born in sin and you can't get out of it. They say that's a pretty pessimistic view of human nature. Anybody want to take a swing at, if you're not saved, what's the view of human nature? What view of human nature?
Maybe that it's all comes down to your good deeds and outweigh your bad deeds, and it really doesn't make a difference there, and that you should live. I think many times you still embrace the moral code life and doing others that you'd have doing yourself, and so as long as you're doing that, then you're fine.
Right.
Because all roads lead to heaven.
Basically, one of the things that separates us as Christians from the unsaved is our view of human nature. Because the unsaved, for the most part, think human nature at its bottom line is good. They think that you're a good person, you're born a good person, that you don't, go out and sin because you really want to be a nasty person, but it's because of something psychological within you, or it's something in the society that drives you to it. You're basically good. And indeed, you see it all throughout society, because, what's the biggest thing that governments and people want to do? They want to educate you, because they assume that if they educate you, you're a good person, and you'll recognize what the good thing is to do, and you'll be a good person, and you'll do the good thing. That's where you go, when you're starting from that view of human nature. And when they hear a Christian talking about you're not good, when they hear you say you are born in sin and you are born evil, it's like, well, how can you say that? That's a really ugly, nasty view of human nature. And like I said, a lot of people think that. Why, however, let's get back to sin is good. Why might it be a good thing to say, I was born in sin, I am a sinner by nature, I can't do anything about it? What's a good thing that comes out of that?
It makes you realize your need for God.
There you go. Right there is the first thing. It makes you need or recognize, I can't do anything about this. It recognizes your need for God. And so that is one of the good things. But even if you're not a Christian, even if it's not making you recognize that, can you see a couple of other reasons maybe? What might be some of the other reasons be? And we're getting a little bit, I'm getting a little bit deeper than I intended to with that, but so I'll quit making it a question. The one thing is, if I come to the thought, okay, I am a sinner, I am born a sinner, it's my nature, and that. One of the nice things is it means that I'm not worried about all the psychological things out there that tell me why I'm bad. I'm not looking back at my past. Was it my father? Was it my mother? Was it the the way I was raised? Are these all to blame? And, I'm not coming up into my 20s and 30s and 40s with people telling me I really need to get into counseling with a good psychologist so that we can deeply delve into the roots of my past and we can figure out what causes me to do something and maybe then I can deal with that in the past and I can get over this and I can live a better life, be a better person, or it gives me an excuse not to change. Oh, well, I was raised this way psychologically, so I can't change. And therefore, I might just as well get along with it and go with it. And that, by the way, is what you see a lot in society today. People being excused for what they've done because of the psychological things that happen to them when they're young. Anybody got a shot at something that happened just this week where we're already starting to see stuff like that come into play? Biggest thing in the news this week.
The shooting in Minnesota?
Shooting in Minnesota. Read now that it's been 2 or 3 days and you are starting to see all of the psychological explanations for why it was done. And it's, sometimes it's hidden. More and more it's not though. And that's why we can excuse what he did and excuse him for what he did because it was the psychological things and he couldn't do anything about it. If we say sin is, you have a sinful nature, you don't get that excuse. But by the same token, you also say, I do need God. I can't do this on my own. A psychologist isn't going to help me. My psychological roots can't be changed. Therefore, I need to look someplace else. The other one, by the way, why it's good that we know about sin, is sociological. And again, this has got a big thing playing right now. What's sociological? What about the world? Huh? Society, exactly. And what is it, you're young enough, what is it that kind of drives society today? What do we all have?
Our environment.
Exactly. And what
Social media.
controls, social media. Social media, just literally within the last 10 years, but I mean, going back a little further, has dramatically altered our understanding of who we are and what drives us and what we can do. We're all looking at our phones. We are all being given cues by computer algorithms as to what we're supposed to feel, what we're supposed to think, how we're supposed to do things. If we know that we come equipped with a sin nature, we don't ultimately have to fall into that trap. We don't have to fall into saying, okay, my phone will tell me or will lead me. And again, it's a big thing because it's not so much for some of us old gray-headed folks because as hard as we try, we can't get enough of the electronics and understand it and that. But younger people who grew up with smartphones, and you're unfortunately in that category, it's a real struggle to find your identity outside of what you're seeing on that phone.
But our environment is also fastly moving right now. So.
And changing and changing and changing. In fact, you're kind of an example because what's one of the first things that they started to do this year, literally this Monday in school?
AI?
AI is one thing, but they took your phones away.
Oh, I'm in college, so.
Oh,
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
know about the,
Okay.
I don't know.
They can't have their phones in
So they
school.
can't have phones?
No,
No,
they
between classes and lunchtime. that's-
They
exactly.
take them away?
Hmm.
I don't think
Well,
they
you have to
take
leave them in
away.
your locker.
Locker
They
and
have-
they have to
They
stay
have
in your
holding spots
locker.
for them to put them in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
they
did
have.
Last year, each classroom
Well, I
had,
guess that might save for like,
Hoover had like little cubbies
Yeah.
type things in each classroom that they had to put their phones in as they came into the room.
Mhm.
Well, the news had a thing on just the other night that only the first week they've already found out that the attention span is.
Exactly.
Yeah, the schools.
Well, even the
have-
kids are like, this is way better.
Yeah, the schools
Mhm.
have already banned
Do
them
they
and
like it?
found
Yeah.
Yeah.
increases. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's some that don't,
Yeah.
but
See, you're getting to be an old fogey like the rest of us.
yeah.
The kids like it.
Well, wouldn't you say though, the social also kind of plays into the psychological?
Yeah. They both play together. And the thing is, though, like I said, if you're not a Christian by background, you've got all of these things that you can pin your sin nature on, but not your sin nature yourself on, but ultimately, these are all things that you're looking at when you're trying to figure out, why am I so dissatisfied with life? Why does life, just not seem to work? And that, is it the psychological? Is it the social? And that, if we go and take the hard news of the Bible that, no, it's because you're born with a sin nature. If you are thinking it's psychological, if you're thinking it's societal, you're also thinking, and I can do something about that. I can change. I can turn over a new leaf. I can start a new job. I can move to a new place. You're always thinking, I can change. And it's up to me. And maybe I go to a counselor for help, or maybe my friends give me some ideas, or maybe I get on the internet and I Google an AI, chatbot, which kind of guides me psychologically.
AI if they don't have their phones.
Well, the students can't, but I'm thinking, as you get older though, and even at home though, they can use AI because they can get to it there.
Most
And a
of
lot of them have laptops
Yeah,
too.
most
Yeah.
of the schools now
Yeah.
issue laptops or tablets to the
Yeah.
students.
You can still get on
Yep.
Google to look up stuff, but most of the stuff is
Yeah.
white.
Yeah, my granddaughter just graduated and they were, since she was in middle school, they were issued either a laptop or a tablet every year.
Yeah.
And
The
Carlisle's
phones are
been
just
doing
trying
that
to
for
take that
quite a
away
few
from us.
years
The
too.
distraction was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like I said though, if you think human nature is good and it's yours and you can change it yourself, you're going to go any number of different directions. And AI is one of the ways. There's a case that just went to court within the last month of a 16-year-old who got on AI, was using it for psychology. He was using it to counsel him. He was literally going to it with his problems and seeking wisdom and answers. And ultimately, it led him to suicide. And, the parents were saying that when they looked, and that the AI quite literally was telling him how to commit suicide. It was telling him the best time when he could get liquor from his parents when they wouldn't be aware of it to dull the pain and that. And it was all because the algorithms were saying that this person is ill, this person is sick, and the AI led him down that path. And he's trying to get better, but he's trying to get better on his own. That's why sin, as I said up here, the bottom line is it is a good thing if we understand it. And if we we take care of it. Because it's the way we realize, like Penny was saying right at the beginning, I can't do anything about it. I am helpless. It's only when you have got severe, great pain that you go to the doctor because you can't do anything about it. I remember last year, July 4th, I was at my son's house and I fell off a ladder and I broke my wrist. And that hurt. I mean, it was the sharpest pain I've felt in literally decades. And, the second I hit the ground and hit my wrist, I knew I got to go to the doctor. I can't do anything about this. I'm not going to get up and take a couple of ibuprofen, or I'm not going to get up and sit down and catch my breath and kind of wiggle my hand around and the pain's going to go away. I can't deal with this on my own. Sin needs to be that way. That sin nature, we have to be able to feel the sin deeply enough and hard enough to know I can't deal with this on my own. Psychologist isn't going to help me. Counseling isn't going to help me. AI isn't going to help me. Nothing's going to help me. I need something else. And then we're open to God. That's when we say, I can't get there. In the book, he talks about a guy who was studying AA and went to, an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and was listening. He went to them all over the country and was listening to people, and he's doing some PhD study and that. But he went to one, and there was a guy up there who was doing it all right. He was saying, I'm an alcoholic, and I admit that, and he was blaming it on literally everyone else in his life. I'm an alcoholic because my mother was nasty. I'm an alcoholic because my wife doesn't understand me. I'm an alcoholic because my boss puts too much pressure on me. And he says, this is why I have to stop drinking. And he says, I need to get sober so that I can get back at them. And the guy was sitting next to another person who'd been in AA for a number of years. And, he basically said to, he said to him, he said to the guy who was doing the study that he hasn't been given the gift of low self-esteem yet. And he's right. It's only when we get the gift of low self-esteem, of getting our pride out of the way, pride being the original sin, that we can really see the need we have for help. And so that's why I say sin is a good thing. So let me just, let's think a little bit more, though, about this. We talk about sin. I've been sitting there using it and throwing the word around like every one of you understands it perfectly. What is sin? Not sin nature, by the way, but what is sin?
Anything that separates us from God.
Okay, that's a pretty good answer. Anything that separates, yeah. It basically is anything that separates us from God. But why would we want to be separated from God? Because you're right, but why would we want to be separated from God? What is it that would want us, make us kind of want to be separate from God?
The desire to do our own will, not His will.
All right, pride, a desire to do it our way, or we look at God and we're saying, God, you're moving too slow here. I need to do something like this and that. That's a lot of the root of it. But I'm going to suggest that there's one other big word. Maybe not a big word, but identity. Talk a lot about that in the world today. What's your identity? What's our identity? Where does our identity come from? And where do we as people, where do people find their identity? Not Christians, particularly, but Christians, non-Christians, where do people look to find their identity in this world?
Work. Work.
Okay, yeah, work is a very good one. What else?
Their family.
Family? Mm-hmm. Who might be?
Social media right now is where a lot of younger generations go to find their own identities.
Mm-hmm. When you're on social media, and again, I'm showing my age here because I remember Facebook, but when you were on Facebook and you were reading Facebook, what did you put on Facebook when you were on Facebook? What kind of things did you put on there?
I've never been on Facebook,
Right.
but
That's why I said I'm old.
and
I'm so ashamed.
I'm only like 44 or whatever, but I think a lot of people go out there to basically just tell what they're doing to get reaffirmation, from others and those likes and things like that. So it's like, oh, I did this today, so.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. And again, I'm not even on Facebook hardly anymore. I only do it to stalk my kids. But yeah, you go on Facebook, and when I was on Facebook, I would, we'd go on vacation and I'd put up the pictures of where we'd been, what we'd done, the things we'd seen, and that. And, every time you look at Facebook, all you were seeing were the best parts of people's lives. Out to dinner, what good thing they ate, what trip they had just been on, what they and their friends had just done. You were always getting that. And so if you were getting your identity kind of from social media, and you're saying, everybody has a better life than me. Look what they're doing, and look what they're eating, and look what fun they're having, and look at all of these things that, because all you were seeing was a good part of a person's life. Nobody was putting up there the deep, meaningful failures of their life. And so when you failed, it's like, nobody on Facebook's failed. What's wrong with me? So if you're finding your identity off of that or trying to, you're putting up all of the good things that are going on in your life. You're feeding into the thing too, knowing, one, that, yeah, those are good things, but knowing that I'm lying. My Facebook page is a lie because all it shows, even if it's everything I've done, all it shows is my good stuff. And do we see the person whose other Facebook posts we're reading? Are we saying to ourselves, is their life a lie? And so, if you're kind of finding your identity in social media, and at this point, it's well past me, what the social media platforms are these days that are so big. But every one of them still has that kind of built-in flaw. And if you're trying to build an identity that way, you can't. Or I shouldn't take it back. I say you can, but it's always, that it's based on a lie. And so that can be a real big problem with finding your identity there. Where are some other places we find our identity, that people look for their identity? We got work, we got family. I'm sorry, what? School, exactly.
Education.
Yep, exactly. How would you find your identity, do you think, in school? Is it what?
It's just kind of a guide through life,
Yeah.
Fit in with different groups of people.
Yeah.
Start to identify, with them, or follow them potentially.
Yep.
Athletes.
Yeah. We did just start school, but particularly.
Sports and everything.
Yeah, because you go to school, and the first thing you really learn, where do I sit at lunch?
Oh, yeah, that was always hard.
Yeah, you think? And that's because your identity really kind of depends on which lunch table you were getting to sit at, because you were identified by that. And so, if you're a jock and you're starting on the football team, you're sitting at one lunch table. If you are a band geek and you are very good, you're sitting at another table. But, everybody's identity. And when you're sitting at the table, at your lunch table, there's 5, 6, 7, 8 other people around you that, you like and they're friends and that. But you're still trying to, am I a better football player than Bob over here? I'm starting on varsity. He's only a second stringer. Or John is on the JV. There's a hierarchy. There's identity. And everybody is striving to look their best. So identity is ultimately where sin really shows up. Because if we're trying to get an identity, and as I said, we're doing it apart from God, we're doing that. If we're trying, what are we actually doing in trying to get that identity, trying to find our identity? Are we violating the first commandment? First commandment, Exodus chapter 20 and verse 3. You shall have no other gods before me. And it may seem like a stretch. It's really not once you think about it. But if your identity is based on your work, what does that tend to make you do at work? you tend to deify it. Because if that's my identity, then I'm going to do my best to be good at work. I'm going to be doing my best to really be a good, have a good identity based on what I'm doing at my work. Now, this tends to be a bit more of a problem, or used to be anyway, with men. Men become workaholics and they're at the office, an hour before it opens and they're there an hour after it closes because they want to impress the boss with how energetic they are and how they're striving to do better and how they're reaching to, become better, because we want that feedback. We want that identity kick that comes from being good at what we're doing and being recognized for being good at what we do. And without even realizing it, we've deified work. We've made it a god. And not only made it a god, but getting back to what Penny said earlier, we've separated ourselves from God because we're so busy trying to find our identity apart from Him with work. And again, without trying to be sexist, because things have changed a lot, even in the last 20 years, women, it was tended to be more a family issue. It was women identify with their family, and what do they want to do? You got kids. What do you want to do with your kids? You want to raise good kids, basically it. You want to be able to raise good kids. When you go to the teacher's conference, you want the teacher to say, little Johnny did a beautiful job with his vocabulary words this week. He had them all down and he was able to spell them and he did a good job. Johnny, is a good kid. What's the last thing you want to hear when you go to a teacher's conference?
They're failing.
Yes, exactly.
They're not a good kid.
You're not a good kid. Well, yeah, and that's more and more it.
They're struggling.
Yeah, you're not. And so, but why is it the last thing you want to hear? I mean, if you think about it objectively, you go in and the teacher says, Johnny's failing at math and that. Objectively, you listen, you hear that, and you say, okay, we need to work with him on his math skills. This is an area that we need to take care of, just like when you go to the doctor and you've sprained your wrist and you put the cast on it or whatever it needs to be done so it gets better and you go for it. It's a good indicator of something that needs to be happening in Johnny's life. But what is it that really we feel when the teacher says Johnny is failing at math?
I'm a bad parent.
Exactly.
I was gonna say with me, when
That's-
my son had found a learning disability, it's like, what did I do wrong?
Yep.
I'm a bad mother.
Right. And if we if we chase it back, it gets my identity because my identity is wrapped up in my child and how my child does. And therefore, if my child is doing well, I'm doing well, and I have a good identity. If my child is not doing well, I am a failure, like you said, and my identity is shot to pieces. And in a way, and what you're seeing again is we're deifying our identity. We're getting our self-worth from how we're doing on our job. We're getting our self-worth from how our kids are doing at school. And so we are getting our self-worth from a place where who controls our self-worth? Somebody else. At work, it's your boss. If your boss is, if you're doing your best in the ring and your boss is just constantly, I don't know, our self-worth is shot. And it's because we've got a boss and we've deified the boss. And we need his opinion to be good in order for us to be good at work and to have that good identity. If it's our child, you put your identity in the hands of a child. And by the way, they know this. Children are extremely intelligent, and they recognize that's one of the controls they have. Because if I go to school and I do well and mommy's happy, hey, all's good. But if I'm mad at her or him, dad, then I go and I screw up, then our self-worth is shot, and it's not something we can control. And so as sin, what I'm saying, and coming back to, if we define sin as whatever separates us from God, or even better, what is it that we're putting before God? You shall have no other gods before me.
Put yourself before God.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the basic, ultimate definition of sin. And that's why, when I say sin is a good thing, is because it's when we realize if my identity is in the hands of my child or in the hands of my boss, then I don't have a lot of control there. Better that I recognize if my identity is in the hands of God. If instead of putting work, family, hobbies, whatever it is in front of God, if I make Him the one that I worship and who is first in my life, guess what? We just had the lesson in the men's group. God loves me. He wants me to do well. He forgives me when I do something wrong or do something stupid, and that He doesn't cast me out. He still loves me. And so sin, if it gets us to that low esteem place where we realize I can't do anything about this on my own. It doesn't matter how good I do at my job. It doesn't matter how good a parent I am. It doesn't matter any of that. What matters first and most importantly is my relationship with God. And so, once we kind of figure that out, and that's a question for each of us, because we're all prone to this, and I'll be first to answer that, say that. What do we ultimately find our identity in? And, with me, it's standing up here in front of you guys, showing off my biblical knowledge. I identify as a theologian, and I'm saying, listen, they're listening to me, they're learning things from me. And my identity, if I'm not careful, gets really wrapped up in my ability to preach, my ability to teach, my ability to understand Bible, and the rest of that. And it's real easy for me to fall into that and forget all of it comes from God. And if I'm doing this, and I'm doing it because it makes me feel better, then God is looking at it and saying, so what? He says, are you doing it to glorify me? Are you putting me first in this? Is the reason you're here not because you want the good opinion of the people who are listening to you? Or is it because you want me to using you as my instrument to glorify myself? And that's a struggle. That really is. And like I said, I'm not trying to say, that anyone who is seeking their identity separately, is bad. Because I do the same thing. And I have to constantly be looking at that and trying to balance those issues. This is a really difficult thing. So, the question here would be, what are you really trying to find your identity in? And let me give you one other thought that Keller has in there that's a really good one. And that is this. Sin is not just doing bad things. Our tendency is we look at the 10 Commandments and we say, well, oh gosh, I was coveting today and I, was thinking about robbing from the IRS or whatever. So we think it's doing bad things, violating the 10 Commandments. And we forget the first one. Because sin is not just doing bad things. That plays a big part in it. But it's also making good things the ultimate thing. And if you think that through, it's not a bad thing to want to do right and do well at your job, to do a good job. I mean, that's a good thing, as long as it's not doing it so that you feel better about yourself, but you're recognizing that God has given me a calling wherever I'm at. And am I honoring and glorifying Him through my calling, or am I doing my best and trying to impress the boss and doing the best I have so that I feel better about who I am, and because my identity is wrapped up with it? It's the same with parenting. Parenting is a wonderful thing. I think we all get there. And we want to do good at parenting, and there's nothing wrong with that. as long as ultimately we realize, why am I raising these kids and why do I want them to be good? I'm raising these kids to serve God because these are God's gift to me, and I want to shepherd that gift, and I want to do the best I have with that gift for Him, because if He's pleased with how I'm raising my children, that's the most important thing right there. And that's why I say sin is making good things the ultimate thing instead of putting them in the place that they belong. Let me just try and wrap this up real quickly. The personal consequences that come from sin, is, first of all, if we get our identity apart from God, no matter where we're getting it from, it's inherently unstable. It will always, in sooner or later, some way, shape, or form, be unstable. So there's that. Also, you ask yourself, if it is unstable, what happens when you lose your identity? When your job, all of a sudden you're laid off. When your child really goes south. What happens to your identity then? Is that Tanks, exactly. And, this is what drives people to psychologist's office, to psychiatrist's office. This is what ultimately pushes people to suicide, when they lose any hope of finding their identity, not realizing that it ultimately comes, from Jesus Christ. And I would ask you this: what happens if you lose your identity due to somebody else's failing? Your boss is a jerk and he backstabs you, and you lose your job so that he can get a promotion. What happens to your identity when you lose your identity because someone else is failing?
I think it would drive you to find a new identity.
Well, that is part of it. Mm-hmm.
Besides it, there's a root of bitterness and anger that would have to just take over.
Exactly.
Consume you.
It can make you extremely bitter, angry, upset against the person that did it. And it leaves you with that rage and if you're not a Christian and you don't know what to do with it, this gets back to Minneapolis, you listen to what the person that did it was writing in those journals on that, the hate, the bitterness, the anger. You killed 2 little kids and you put 18 people in the hospital. Now, I'm not saying that happens to everyone that does that, but you see what I mean. When you lose your identity, it's a major disaster. And when you lose it, not because of something you did, because of what somebody else did, there's a real deep place for bitterness, anger, and rage to come out in that. And then the other half of that question is, what happens if you lose your identity because of your own failing? What happens if you do fail and lose your identity because of it?
Depression.
Yeah, deep depression, anger at yourself, because depression is defined as simply anger turned inward. And so if we're finding our identity outside of God, if we're deifying something, putting it over God, then we are setting ourselves up for that. And this is what we need to be teaching the world. This is what the world needs to be kind of learning from us. We don't have God as our number one because we're slaves or because we're servants. We should be, but we should. But because we know that if we find our identity any place but in God, the odds are very good that it's going to be a disaster. Any place but God. So you got that, what's going on. And we can tell people that if you have God, if you find your identity in Him, you avoid these traps. You don't risk anything. You find the love. Now, again, real quickly, there are social consequences to sin. Social consequences that come out of it. When we look at the society around us, and not just us as Christians, but people, and you hear them, what do people say about society today? And not just American society, but the whole world. What do they say about it? Is it good? Is it bad? Falling apart? That's the most common thing you hear anymore. Society is falling apart. It is fragmenting. We hear it in this country a lot, just because of the political situation and everything else. But if you look around the world, you look at England, they're having massive riots right now. They're falling apart. You look at Germany, they're starting to fall apart. You look at Asia, Europe, and that. The world seems to be just totally fragmenting. And why? Because people put other things besides God as their deity, as where they get their identity. And when I say that, if you think on a national basis, if you think on a larger basis, personally, we say, okay, I'll find my identity in work, I find my identity in family, but on a more community level or national level, people find their identity in their race, in their religion, in their community. And when we do that, when I elevate who I am as an American above God, that means by definition that I'm looking around at all these other countries and they're second. Gosh, what does that lead to? Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Gaza. It leads to war. It leads to disaster. When I put my religion, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, above God himself, my identity as a Christian as now opposed to my identity as a child of God, it's the same thing. You look at the India and Pakistan, the Islamic Hindu thing that's going on, the anger and rage there. It leads to war. And just, on a small, quickly, that's what sin does on a social basis. When we are putting our identity as to what race we are, what religion we are, what country we are, that leads to the biggest disasters we see, and that's what we're seeing around us. And then, last one, and I'll close with this, there is a cosmic consequence to sin. And when I say cosmic, I mean not eternal, I mean worldwide, almost universe-wide. In fact, it is universe-wide. Because Genesis chapter 3 and verses 17 and 18, and Adam had sinned in the garden, God says to him, because you've listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. And what he means by that is not just that, oh, Adam, you're going to have weeds in your garden. He is going to have weeds in his garden. He does specifically say that. But it means that not just the garden, but the entire world is cursed. The entire world is fallen. It's not just us that have fallen with sin. It is the entire physical world that has fallen. It's why we have disease. It's why we have weather that destroys people, tidal waves. It's why we have wild animals that eat people. I mean, the entire creation is fallen because of sin. Adam's sin, and it continues because of our sin. And Paul reaffirms this for us in Romans chapter 8. He says, for the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, meaning Adam, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in pains of childbirth until now. The whole creation, again, comes down to sin, the way it is today and the way it stays today. And it is only going to obtain freedom when we as Christians really realize who we are and are saved and God comes back. So, long story about sin, but if you think about it, like I said, sin is a good thing like pain is a good thing. And so, we want to deal with it. We don't want to give in to it. But we want to make it force us to look. What am I deifying? other than God? What am I putting above him? And we all are, to some extent or another. But if we realize it, we can do something about it. I know I've got a broken wrist. Now the doctor can do something. Any thoughts, questions you would want to ask? All right. Well, thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.